What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a second discussion for my channel. My name is Blaze, and today I'm here to talk to you about a simple subject. Well, it's kind of a controversial subject, uh, but basically why I didn't give Legend of Zelda a perfect 10.0 score, hailing it as a perfect game. Um, I know a lot of news outlets out there have given this game a perfect score. I think IGN and Game Informer probably did as well. And there's a very many reasons to give this game a perfect score, give it a 10.0. Uh, but I didn't feel that way about this game, and I'm not saying that this game is not great. I'm not saying that the game is not one of the greatest games to come out in recent memory. What I'm saying is that I didn't really feel it as a Zelda game, and I'm going to get into some very specific reasons as to why I felt that way in just a few minutes. But before I do that, I want to let you know that first of all, there's going to be spoilers in this episode. So if you have not finished Breath of the Wild, and if you have not gotten very far in the game, or you don't want to know what happens, then don't watch the rest of this video because I'm going to talk about specifically things in the ending, as well as different bosses you may encounter and things like that. So if you don't want to know about those things, don't watch. Period. You can always come back once you finish. Um, but the other thing is also keep in mind that I'm very overly critical when it comes to video games, movies, stories, things like that. I don't know why I got that way, but I'm very overly critical. So, movies like Captain America Winter Soldier, my friends loved that movie, but I didn't love it. I thought it was good, but I didn't love it. Um, so Zelda was kind of like that for me. And if you're still here, that means you're okay with hearing spoilers. So I'm gonna go right into it. Zelda was that way for me. I didn't. Well, Breath of the Wild, I should say specifically. Breath of the Wild was that way. Um, right off the bat, the first thing that I didn't like about the game necessarily was that it only had 4 dungeons, and you could argue that Majora's Mask only had 4 dungeons, and that was an excellent game. And yeah, I agree. I definitely agree that it's not a valid argument because a different Zelda game that I actually loved playing only had 4 dungeons. But the dungeons in Breath of the Wild didn't really feel like dungeons. I felt like they were more um, like, I mean, basically they're divine beasts that you needed to um, regain control of in order to damage Ganon's castle or get into Ganon's castle. Well, mainly to damage the boss at the end of the game. So I happened to do all 4 of the divine beasts, and when I got to Ganon's final battle, um, they all shot a beam at him, and they were able to take his health down 50%, which was a huge help, and not something you really need to do. You can go into the fight with just 3 hearts if you want to, um, and maybe see how it goes. With him at full health, if you wanted to do that, it'd be a mistake probably, but you could do that. Um, but I don't know. I felt like the dungeons just they didn't feel like dungeons. They felt more like chores, more like I don't know. They didn't really feel like classic Zelda dungeons, and I think one of the ways that they could get around that in the next Zelda game, and what I'd really like to see in the next Zelda game, is that we have this huge open world, which by the way is amazingly gorgeous. It's a beautiful world, um, but they took the dungeons that were great staples in the main Zelda series, and they took them out of the world. Whereas if you look at Ocarina of Time, even the original Zelda game, those dungeons were built into the world, whether it was inside of a tree or inside of a mountain that you had to explore. They were inside the world. Well, the dungeons in this game were kind of taken out of that and put into this mechanical, like futuristic beast, which I guess it's not necessarily bad, but it's not what I expected in Zelda. And I was really hoping that they could do something a little bit better with um, with that. So in the next game, I really am hoping that they put those things back into the world where they take a mountain range and they open this mountain range up and they put a dungeon right there. You go into the cave and there's an entrance and that's your dungeon. That's what I'm really hoping happens in the next Zelda game, which we know going forward the Zelda games are going to be more of an open world experience, much like this one. Whether it remains in Hyrule or it's a different area like Termina or a whole new area is yet to be seen, but um, they definitely are going to stick with that open world environment, which is totally cool. Totally cool. But that was the first thing right off the bat that I came up with is that I just didn't feel like the dungeons were that creative. I didn't feel like they were that. Um, I don't know. And one of them specifically, I was super, super annoyed by this dungeon, and it was the one in the Gerudo area. I did not like playing that dungeon. I just wanted to be done with it. I just wanted it to be over, but I had to go through all these different, like rotating the thing, to get to where I needed to go, and I was just like, oh, can this please just be over, please? And that was one of the ones where the boss actually, I couldn't beat him, and I feel bad saying that, but I had a hard time beating this boss. Maybe because I hadn't mastered the countering yet, maybe because I didn't really understand what he was doing. I don't know, but I couldn't beat him. So I felt like after 2 or 3 tries, the game took the difficulty of that boss down a notch, and I beat him because he wasn't doing the same things he did the first couple of times I fought him. So that was a little disappointing too. But it's not something I want to see continue as a trend in future Zelda games. If I can't beat the boss, that's on me. Like I'll keep trying. It's no big deal. But I don't want to feel like you gave me a pass because I couldn't finish it. Um, but the next thing is that the bosses. Speaking of the bosses, I didn't really feel like looking back at some of the pictures of the bosses. I know that they looked different, but their color scheme was largely the same. So to me, they all felt like the same boss. They all did different things, but they weren't really. They didn't look different enough for me to see them and go, "That's a whole different boss." If you look back at Ocarina of Time, we had just the first two bosses that you encounter. Um, oh gosh, what was the first one? The spider. Name has escaped me for a moment. I'm sorry about that, but the name has escaped me for a moment. The spider, and then Dodongo's Cavern. Those two bosses were they looked wildly different. They had different actions. They did different things, and I didn't necessarily like that the bosses in this game all looked similar to each other. But they looked different, but they looked similar to each other. And yeah, they did different things, but to me, they may as well have done the same thing because they looked exactly the same. Well, not exactly. They looked the same. They looked similar. But that was really the only other thing that I didn't like about it. Not the only other thing. Getting further into Zelda, I liked that the story was much more together. I thought there was much more of a story between Link and Zelda and a relationship there that was being explored throughout the storyline, which I thought was very cool. And I think that um, that's definitely something that I'd like to see going forward. Is how does this Link interact with this Zelda? Do they always have the same relationship? Is it different? Because in Skyward Sword, it was kind of like that, where Link and Zelda were friends. Um, in Ocarina, they didn't really know each other that well. I think Link just met Zelda, so how is that relationship in future Zelda games going to be incorporated? Because I feel like there's potential there for for different Zelda Link relationships throughout the whole series. And if you look at let's not talk about the cartoon, but if you look at the cartoon, that relationship was totally different than the one that was in um, Breath of the Wild. And I only brought that up because it's a relationship that's not the same, and Link and Zelda in Ocarina of Time didn't really have a relationship, so that's the only reason I brought that up. But it was a different relationship than we're used to seeing from Zelda and Link, and I thought that was really cool. Um, let's not forget that the world again is super huge and super detailed, and I mean just I was wildly impressed by the size and the scope of the world. Graphically, the game was amazing. Um, it was just a little bit disappointing as far as like the amount of content. I almost felt like the game kind of from that moment you woke up and walked through to the Temple of Time, I almost felt like it was kind of pushing you in a certain direction, even though you had your choice of where you wanted to go first, whether it was Goron, Zora, Rudo, or Gerudo. You had your choice of where you wanted to go. It still felt like the game was pushing you, and they set up the fact that you'd already um, attempted to fight Ganon the first time, and then you failed, of course. But we really didn't get a look at. Well, maybe we did. Maybe I missed it, but I don't feel like I got a good understanding of where Ganon came from my first playthrough. Um, of course, he was probably let go of the from the Sacred Realm, something like that. I can't remember. I played it one time. I started the game when it first came out, and I don't remember everything about it. So if I'm missing something, I apologize. You can definitely refresh my memory in the comments below. I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity for you to express how you felt about the game. But that brings me to my next point. How did you feel about the game? Um, do you think it's worthy of the 10.0 that most news outlets were giving Breath of the Wild? Would you have given it a lower score? Would you have given it a higher score? And why? Um, if you could have added any one thing to the game, what would you have added? Is the game right now, is it already perfect? Answer any of those or all of those questions in the comments below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'm doing a lot more of these types of videos going forward. Um, and I'd like to see what you have to think. I'd like to hear what you have to think. So let me know. You can catch me on Twitch pretty much every day of the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, playing various titles. Twitch.tv/L3LAYZE is my uh, web address. You'll see it in the comments in the description down below. Hit me up there as well. Um, I'll be back very soon with another discussion video for you to either agree with or disagree with, sometimes even heatedly disagree with, but let's try and remain respectful. Um, but thanks a lot for stopping by and hanging out, guys, and until next time, I will catch you on the flippity flip.